You made that choice alone, just like you chose to sleep around.
It was Saturday afternoon, the kind Houston does best, thick with humidity, sunlight hazy through the lazy air. We had company. Jenny and her husband Trev had been constants since we transplanted ourselves here, satellites in our small suburban orbit. Dinners out, neighborhood block parties that dissolved into drunken lawn chair confessionals, movie nights that bled into late-night dissections of plot holes. They were our people. Same age bracket, early 30s, all juggling the weight of degrees that hadn't quite paid off yet, careers demanding more than they gave, and the sporadic voids left by Trev and my wife, Debbie, hitting the road for work. Debbie was prepping for another departure, a familiar ritual of packing cubes and travel-sized toiletries. Trev had just vanished down the driveway in a yellow cab, swallowed by the shimmering heat haze, off to conquer his West Coast territory. This was the rhythm. They flew, we stayed, tending the home fires. Jenny crunched numbers as an accountant. I sketched futures as an architect. Our travel logs were thin, mostly weekend trips, maybe a conference once a blue moon. Usually, only one spouse was AWOL at a time. When that happened, the grounded one would drift over to the intact couple, seeking solace in shared meals or lazy Saturday picnics. After Trev's taxi coughed its way out of sight, I left the women to their kitchen kaffeeklatsch. The garage beckoned, my sanctuary of sawdust and solitude. I tidied the workbench, arranging tools with obsessive precision, then ran diagnostics on the security system. We hadn't skimped after that rash of break-ins down the block. Cameras nestled discreetly in corners, microphones hidden like electronic spiders, all feeding a server humming quietly in the attic, dutifully uploading every triggered motion, every captured whisper to the cloud. I could peek into any room via the app, a digital god in my own home. Force of habit, I pulled up the live feed, checking the connections. Everything green. How was the last trip, Deb? Jenny's voice drifted from the kitchen, sharp against the clink of ice and glasses. They were perched at the island, Debbie swirling her wine. Debbie let out that little giggle, the one that usually charmed but now somehow grated. Oh, you know, she said, waving a dismissive hand. Work, client dinners, maybe a hotel bar nightcap. Eventually some sleep. The usual glamorous grind. Is any of that stuff true? Jenny leaned forward, her voice hushed, laced with an anxiety she rarely showed. What they say about people, playing away from home on business trips? The question hung there, heavy as the Houston air. Jenny was clearly picking at a scab, worried about Trev. My wife paused, a beat too long. A significant heart-stopping second where the air thickened. I leaned closer to the garage door crack, straining to hear. I wouldn't worry too much, Jen, Debbie finally replied, her tone suddenly smooth, practiced. She took a deliberate sip of her wine. Trev always comes back home to you, doesn't he? Yes, but... Jenny trailed off. I just wonder what he does when he's out there. Alone. If he's alone. Jen, Debbie soothed, her voice like honey mixed with something else. Something slick. He comes home to you. Don't get twisted up about whatever happens when he's not here. She paused again, letting the words land. What happens outside the house means nothing. Means nothing. The words echoed in the cavern of the garage, bouncing off the tool chests and the lawnmower. What happens outside the house means nothing. Did she actually say that? My own wife? It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Flat, devoid of judgment or even contemplation, just a fact. Like saying the sky is blue or water is wet. My stomach clenched. What do you mean, Deb? Jenny's voice was tight, anxious. But Debbie had already retreated, pulling a veil of casualness back over herself. Nothing, Jen, she answered, carefully measuring her words. Just that you're worrying for nothing. Trev adores you. He comes home to you, loves you. These trips are just work, nothing more. I could hear the forced brightness in Debbie's tone, the subtle shift to safer ground. Jenny didn't sound convinced, not really, but she let Debbie steer the conversation away, politeness winning out over palpable unease. I backed away from the door, the concrete cool beneath my feet, but my insides felt hot, scorched. Means nothing. I let them chatter for another half hour, the sound a meaningless buzz against the roaring in my ears. Then I forced myself back into the kitchen, grabbing a mug, pouring coffee I didn't want. My hand trembled slightly. I needed caffeine, clarity, anything to cut through the sudden fog of suspicion. After another 40 minutes of strained small talk, Jenny finally made her excuses and drove away. leaving Debbie and me adrift in the sudden quiet of the house. I managed politeness, a thin veneer over a chasm of unease. Her words hadn't just made me nervous. They detonated something inside me. As she headed upstairs, the sound of the shower starting a distant hiss, my mind raced, a frantic hamster on a wheel. Had she cheated? Was this a confession disguised as reassurance? How many times? Was it recent? Or had this been going on for months, years? The way she said it, so matter of fact, so accepting. It wasn't introspection, it was policy, her policy. What the heck was I supposed to do? Confront her? Based on 4 casually dropped words? Blow up 4 years of marriage, the tentative plans for kids we'd started discussing? Throw it all away on a gut feeling amplified by a careless remark? Had she slept with someone else on her last trip? The one before? How could I ever trust her again? How could I be sure a child would even be mine? Phoenix, San Diego, Seattle, Omaha, her usual circuit. Did she have a different man in each city, or just one steady thing? The thought didn't make me angry, not yet, just hollow. A profound, aching disappointment mixed with a rising tide of anxiety. The woman I loved, the life I thought I had. It felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I didn't join her in bed that night. She came downstairs later, wrapped in that silk robe she wore when she wanted closeness, her hair damp. I feigned sleep on the sofa, face buried deep in the cushions, my breathing deliberately slow and even. She murmured my name, touched my shoulder, tried to nudge me awake. I remained stubbornly inert, a log, dead to the world. Eventually she sighed, a sound of mingled confusion and frustration, and retreated upstairs. I didn't turn, didn't move, just lay there, rigid, until a restless, dream-haunted sleep finally claimed me sometime before dawn. The smell of coffee brewing dragged me back to consciousness. Sandals patted softly on the kitchen tiles. I cracked an eye open. A mug sat on the end table beside the sofa, steam curling invitingly. Anxiety, cold and sharp, pierced through the morning haze. I didn't move, didn't speak, delaying the inevitable confrontation I knew was coming. When I finally pushed myself up, Debbie was standing near the sofa, wearing only the robe and sandals, her blonde hair spilling over one shoulder. She watched me with a thoughtful, probing expression. I met her gaze briefly, then looked away, walking past her towards the bathroom without a word, ignoring the offered coffee. I locked the bathroom door behind me. The scrape of her sandals told me she'd followed, lingering outside for a moment before the sound receded. We existed in a bubble of silence all morning. Breakfast was a solitary affair for each of us. I was almost grateful for the quiet. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. Not until I knew more. I wasn't afraid of confronting her. A part of me craved it. But I needed facts, information, ammo. It's my nature, the architect in me demanding blueprints before construction. I never move without knowing the angles, the load-bearing truths. I retrieved my laptop, settling into the small office nook in the corner of the living room. The desk faced inwards, shielding the screen from view. Debbie drifted past several times, a ghost flitting between the bedroom and kitchen, keeping her distance. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. Why wasn't she asking what was wrong? Was this part of the game? Pretend nothing happened until it blew over? The thought fueled a slow burn of anger. Taking a deep breath, I focused. Private investigators, Phoenix, San Diego, Seattle, Omaha. I filled out online forms, sketching brief, discreet descriptions of the surveillance required. Used my personal credit card, the one she rarely saw statements for. 4 retainers paid. 4 sets of eyes hired to watch my wife. "Are you hungry?" she finally asked, her voice tentative around 2 in the afternoon. It drifted from the kitchen doorway. The thought of sharing a meal with her, making small talk across the table, felt repulsive. "No," I answered curtly, keeping my eyes glued to the screen, pretending deep absorption in some complex design. She lingered, watching me, trying to read the sudden frost that had settled between us. I refused to look up, refused to engage. Any wife with nothing to hide would be demanding answers by now, hurt and confused by the cold shoulder. Any wife with nothing to hide? "Maybe we could get out for a bit," I said suddenly, closing the laptop with a decisive snap. I stood, grabbing my wallet, phone, keys. Surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a cautious nod. She reached for her purse, her own phone already clutched in her hand. That cursed phone, always within reach, always password protected. As we walked to the door, I let her go first, my eyes tracing the familiar, beautiful curve of her back. A figure I'd considered mine, an extension of my own body, until yesterday. Now, alien territory. We always took my car. Habit. She moved to the passenger side, waiting, expecting me to open the door for her like always. Bile rose in my throat. The last thing I wanted was to perform these small intimacies. But I forced myself. Play the part. Whatever suspicions I had, I couldn't let her know. Not yet. Not before her trip on Tuesday. I had to make sure she walked into whatever trap was waiting, unsuspecting. Maybe I'd already tipped my hand with the coldness. Sorry about being off today, I said, starting the engine, forcing a casual tone. Think I screwed up a calculation on the Johnson project. Need to run some quick checks and fixes when I get in Monday. Relief washed over her face, so palpable it was almost embarrassing. Then she caught herself, arranging her features into a mask of concerned wifely support. The Johnson project? She asked. The house design you finished 3 weeks ago? So much for paying attention during our supposed pillow talk. No, I lied smoothly. Something newer, a potential bid. Need to redraw a few things, correct the load values. Should be fine. Just hate making mistakes. You're too hard on yourself, she replied, relaxing visibly now that she had a plausible work-related explanation for my mood. Everyone makes mistakes. That's for certain, I thought, but kept my face neutral. Yeah, well. We fell into superficial chatter, errands, bills, the neighbor's annoying dog. My mind, however, was wrestling with the immediate problem. Bedtime. I couldn't pull the asleep on the couch routine again. It would scream suspicion. Back home, the charade continued. I showered first, then retreated to our bed with my tablet, pretending to read. I stared blankly at the same page of a technical journal for what felt like an hour, while the sounds of her shower filled the background silence. She emerged, toweling her hair, then slipped into that silk robe again, the one she wore with nothing underneath, the one that usually signaled closeness. We had closeness. It felt mechanical, detached. I went through the motions, trying to recall the feeling of the last time we'd made love, the last time I thought she was making love to me. It felt like a lifetime ago. Afterwards, she lay beside me, the robe slightly askew. I kept my eyes fixed on the tablet, pretending absorption. Her hand rested on my thigh, warm, familiar. She shifted closer. Are you still mad at me? She finally whispered into the dimness. I didn't answer immediately. I turned slowly, deliberately studying her face in the faint light filtering from the hallway, searching for a flicker of guilt, a sign, anything. I found your birth control pills in the back of the bathroom cabinet, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. You started taking them again. She froze. I felt the tension ripple through her. Yes, she admitted after a moment, her voice small. I know we talked about waiting a few months, but thought we'd decided to wait together. I cut her off, keeping my tone level. Not a unilateral decision. I let the implication hang there. She didn't defend herself. I'm sorry, Carson. Really? I just wasn't ready right now. I gave a small, dismissive nod, not wanting to escalate this particular battle. Not now. No problem, I replied, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. Turns out I'm not ready for a baby right now either. With you, I added silently, venomously. She was silent for a long count, then slowly withdrew her hand. I remained perfectly still. After a few more minutes of charged silence, she rolled away, facing the edge of the bed, and clicked off her bedside lamp. I listened to the sound of her breathing, deliberately even, perhaps feigned sleep mirroring my earlier performance. After waiting a suitable interval, I quietly got up, took my tablet, and left the room. Carson? Her voice, soft and questioning, followed me as I closed the bedroom door firmly behind me. I didn't look back. The sofa welcomed me like an old, uncomfortable friend. The next morning, she was already up and dressed when my internal alarm clock went off. 6 a.m., time for my run. She was in her work clothes, crisp and professional. Her travel suitcase stood sentinel by the front door, coat draped over the handle. Made you coffee, she said, her voice strained. She hovered, wanting to say more, but seemed hesitant, sensing the Arctic chill emanating from me. When did you find the pills? She finally asked, unable to bear the silence. I could have told her the truth yesterday, but a different kind of cruelty, a desire to make her think I'd been nursing this specific grievance longer, took hold. Last week, I lied, the untruth slipping out easily now. I no longer cared about preserving honesty between us. And you didn't say anything? Didn't think to maybe ask me, your husband, what I thought about it? My voice was low, controlled, but laced with accusation. That's all this is about? relief warred with confusion on her face. "No problem, Deb," I repeated, my tone flat, dismissive. "If you don't want a kid with me, then I guess I don't want one either." The implication was clear, brutal. She opened her mouth, perhaps to argue, perhaps to apologize again, but I walked past her. "Getting late," I mumbled. "Need my run." I needed the pavement pounding under my feet, the rhythmic burn in my lungs, the solitude. Running had always been my therapy, my focus point. Junior high track, high school cross country, the relentless PT in the Army, college stress relief. Running centered me, burned away the fog of doubt and indecision. Now, it was the refuge of a married man contemplating the wreckage of his life. That evening, she came home, went through the motions of cooking dinner. I sat with her, forcing down forkfuls of food that tasted like cardboard. Politeness was a shield, a delaying tactic. Can we talk about the baby thing when I get back from this trip?" she asked tentatively, pushing peas around her plate. "If you want," I answered noncommittally. All I could hear was the echo. What happens outside the house means nothing. The next morning, Tuesday, she was waiting when I came downstairs. Dressed for travel, makeup perfect, a mask of weary professionalism. The packed bag, the coat, the ritual farewell. "You gonna be okay while I'm gone?" she asked, searching my face for something. Reassurance, perhaps? "I'll survive," I replied, my voice clipped. "Always do." "Carson," she began, reaching a hand towards my arm, then letting it drop. "I love you." I just nodded, my face impassive. I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes as my lack of response landed, saw her wince almost imperceptibly. Was that a choked sob I heard as she turned quickly, grabbing her bag and rushing out the door? The sound of her car engine starting, then fading down the street, left a ringing silence in its wake. The moment she was gone, the house felt different. Emptier, yet somehow charged with a new dangerous energy. My energy. That same day, I had a consultation with a divorce lawyer. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. Since we had no kids, it was primarily about dividing assets acquired during the marriage. Texas law, he explained, allowed adultery to be considered in the division of property. We didn't have a prenup, a staggering oversight in retrospect. If the PIs delivered, I could potentially walk away with the lion's share. But lawyers meant battles, protracted skirmishes designed to drain every dollar. What a mess. Jenny had been blowing up my phone. Texts, voicemails. I hadn't responded. I wasn't ready to talk, to share the raw wound of suspicion. I thought about maybe driving over later, but she preempted me, materializing beside my car as I left work that afternoon. A storm cloud in a sensible pantsuit. "Why haven't you answered me?" she demanded, no preamble. Her eyes were narrowed, searching mine. "I had a lot on my mind," I answered evasively. "Take me to dinner, then take me home," she stated, not asked. "We need to talk." Over mediocre pasta at a strip mall Italian place, the dam finally broke. What happens when people aren't home means nothing. I repeated Debbie's words, the phrase tasting bitter. Jenny's fork clattered onto her plate. She nodded slowly, her gaze locking with mine across the table. "Where is she today?" she asked, her voice low and intense. "San Diego," I answered. "Allegedly? Did you call her work? Confirm she actually has meetings there?" Jenny pressed. "No," I admitted, feeling a fresh wave of inadequacy. Why hadn't I thought of that simple check? "Maybe you should have," Jenny replied, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "Because I did." I just stared at her, the bottom dropping out of my stomach. The PIs were one thing. This felt different. More personal, more real. Fast forward a few brutally long days. Debbie's back. Flew in Friday morning, stopped by her office, then came home late afternoon, expecting, I assumed, a quiet evening, maybe takeout, sympathy for her rough week. Instead, she walked into the aroma of roasting peppers and simmering orzo. I'd prepared dinner, set the table, candles even. "Oh my God, honey," she exclaimed, dropping her briefcase by the door, fatigue momentarily forgotten. "You went all out." She came towards me, leaning in for a kiss. It was perfunctory, a husband-wife peck, devoid of passion but loaded with habit. I allowed it, a brief, dry press of lips. It felt like touching a stranger. In that instant, I knew, with chilling certainty, this brittle performance of normalcy, this kiss, her hand brushing mine as she admired the table, it would be the last time. "Trev and Jen are coming over for dinner," I said casually. checking the peppers in the oven, avoiding her eyes. Her head snapped up. Trev and Jen? Surprise, quickly followed by something else. Apprehension flickered across her face. Tonight, I saw the calculations happening behind her eyes, the mental juggling act. I thought maybe just us. She trailed off. Seeing the polite, unreadable smile, I turned towards her. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes, a predator's camouflage. Guess I'll go change then, she said after a beat, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. Freshen up. I watched her walk toward the bedroom, the slight slump in her shoulders betraying the facade. She'd flown from Omaha that morning after a final meeting, swung by her office, and now this. A couple's dinner was likely the last thing her frayed nerves wanted. She probably envisioned a quiet night, maybe a bath, unloading her travel stress onto me. Poor Deb. She had no idea the kind of stress awaiting her. I checked my phone. A text from Jen. On our way, ETA 5 mins. Just then, the shower upstairs shut off. Perfect timing. If my calculations were correct, Debbie would be downstairs, dressed and presentable, just as our guests arrived. They're almost here, I called towards the stairs. No answer. I could almost feel her reluctance vibrating through the floorboards. She reappeared minutes later, having swapped the power suit for jeans and a simple white t-shirt. The straps of a pink bra were faintly visible beneath the thin cotton. Flip-flops completed the casual look. She approached me, forcing another nervous smile, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. The gesture felt alien, unwelcome. How can I help? She asked, her voice a little too bright. Wine's chilling in the fridge, I replied, fussing with the oven timer, maintaining the illusion of the busy host. Peppers need maybe 15 more minutes? Max. Smells amazing, she murmured, peering into the pot on the stove. Orzo pasta? I nodded. Yeah. A shadow crossed her face. Sadness? Regret? I'd made this exact dish for our last anniversary, after that trip to Greece where we discovered our mutual love for Mediterranean food. Memories of sun-drenched islands and stolen kisses on balconies flickered. Unwelcome ghosts at this grim feast. But the evening had a script, and nostalgia wasn't in it. This dish, this echo of happier times, was just another prop. The table was set for 4, 2 on each side. She glanced at the arrangement, a quick, questioning look, then went to the fridge, retrieving a bottle of Zinfandel. She uncorked it, inhaled the aroma deeply, as if seeking fortification. Can I ask? She began, but the doorbell chimed, sharp and demanding. I'll get it, I said quickly, moving past her towards the door. Showtime. I opened the door to find Trev and Jenny on the porch. He looked uneasy, shifty, like a man expecting bad news. Jenny, however, met my eyes with a cool, knowing smile. Then, right there, in front of her husband, she leaned in and kissed me, full on the lips. Not long, but deliberate. Meaningful. Hello, Stallion, she murmured, pulling back with a slight smirk and swept past me into the house. Trev's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, but he schooled his features quickly. He wasn't shocked, I realized. Maybe surprised by the public display, but not the underlying implication. Interesting. Hey, Trev, I said, managing a tight smile. Come on in. Carson, he replied, his voice carefully neutral as he stepped inside. By the time we reached the kitchen, Jenny and Debbie were already exchanging pleasantries, a strained ballet of forced smiles and brittle laughter. For the first time in a long while, I really looked at Trevor. His eyes darted nervously between Jenny, Debbie, and me, like a cornered animal trying to assess the threats. He knew something was off. The air crackled with unspoken tension. It decided on a European-style seating arrangement tonight, I announced brightly, gesturing towards the table. Jen, you're with me. Deb, you sit with Trev. Trev and Debbie exchanged a fleeting, panicked glance before quickly looking away. Jenny giggled, playing her part beautifully. Ooh, I like it. A European theme night. First the food, now the seating. What else do Europeans do, Carson? She asked, raising a suggestive eyebrow. Trev and Debbie remained rigidly silent as they took their designated seats, side by side, radiating discomfort. Jen, oblivious on the surface, kept up a stream of cheerful chatter directed at them, poking playfully at their reserve. God, she was good. Oh, Europeans share a lot more than just dinner seats, Jen, I replied, letting a slow grin spread across my face. Jenny mirrored it, then let out a genuine laugh. They swap partners. Open marriages are practically Tuesday afternoon coffee over there. Really? Jen feigned wide-eyed interest. What would you think about that, Trev? Sharing? He visibly tensed. Not really my thing, he muttered, fiddling with his wine glass. My wife flinched, a tiny, almost invisible reaction, then stared fixedly at her empty plate. I don't know, Trev, Jen mused, tapping a finger against her chin. Maybe the Europeans are onto something. Again, silence from the accused. They just sat there, trapped, occasionally darting furtive, guilty glances at each other when they thought we weren't looking. I brought the food to the table, the steaming peppers, the fragrant orzo. I poured wine generously, topping up their glasses before they could even think to refuse. They were going to need it. As we ate, or pretended to, Jenny lauded the food, praising my culinary skills with exaggerated enthusiasm. Debbie and Trev offered polite, mumbled agreement, picking listlessly at their portions. You could cut the awkwardness with a knife. So how was the trip, Trev? I asked, aiming the question like a missile into the strained silence. Both he and Debbie stopped chewing simultaneously. It would have been comical if it wasn't so utterly pathetic. With every passing second, the weight of their betrayal settled heavier in the room, a suffocating presence. Only Jenny's hand resting lightly on my thigh under the table, a gesture of solidarity, not seduction, kept me anchored. Trev stammered, recovering slightly. Same old, meeting clients, checking in with the regional reps, fly to the next city, repeat. And you, Deb? Jenny asked, turning her bright, inquisitive gaze on my wife. Pretty much the same as Trev, Debbie replied, her voice thin. Different companies, different clients, but same routine. They both went back to pushing food around their plates. The silence descended again, thick and cloying. I refilled their wine glasses pointedly. When dinner was ostensibly finished, meaning Jen and I had cleared our plates while Trev and Debbie had barely made a dent, I stood up. We'll get these, I said, gathering plates. Debbie started to rise, offering to help, a reflex ingrained by years of shared chores. I stopped her with a look. No, you and Trev just got back. Relax, go sit in the living room. Jen and I will handle this. Be right there. Okay, she said, her voice small, accompanied by a tight, forced smile. Trev looked like he wanted to say something to Jenny, maybe an appeal, but she'd already slipped away towards the powder room. I watched Debbie and Trev walk into the living room, shoulders hunched, exchanging tense, whispered words I couldn't quite catch. Plotting, panicking, didn't matter. Jen returned from the bathroom, her expression grimly determined. We quickly rinsed the dishes, loaded the dishwasher, the silence between us purposeful, charged. Then we joined them in the living room. I settled onto the sofa opposite them, Jen beside me. I leaned back, feigning relaxation. So, I began, picking up the earlier thread, a predatory glint in my eye. You guys really aren't into the whole European open marriage idea, huh? I grinned. Jen joined in, laughing softly. Debbie and Trev managed weak, nervous chuckles, trying desperately to treat it as a joke. Too bad, Jenny added, nudging me playfully. Such prudes. She winked at me. I leaned forward, reaching for the remote. Tell you what, I said conversationally. How about we watch something I stumbled across this week? Found it illuminating. Think you'll both find it interesting. Ooh, what is it? A chick flick? Jen asked, hamming up the fake enthusiasm. It's got elements that appeal to both masculine and feminine sensibilities, I replied cryptically, turning on the large flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. I navigated to a specific folder on the networked hard drive, my fingers steady. Showtime, Act 2. The screen flickered to life. At first, just generic street scenes. Sunny day, palm trees, a glimpse of coastline. Then the camera panned, lingering on the distinctive architecture of a well-known San Diego naval base as a car. My car, driven by a PI, tracked a taxi pulling up to the curb in front of a mid-range hotel. Trev frowned, confused. But Debbie recognized it instantly. I watched the color drain from her face just as the video zoomed in, capturing first Trev, then her, exiting the taxi, holding hands. They walked into the lobby, still linked, like giddy teenagers. Shock began to dawn on Trev's face. Debbie looked physically ill. The hidden camera footage, stitched together from the PI's work, followed them seamlessly to the check-in desk, then tracked them as they walked towards the elevators, luggage trailing behind, his arm now slung casually around her shoulders. They were still holding hands as they waited. As the elevator doors slid shut, they turned to each other, leaning in for a long, deep kiss. Carson, you can turn this off, Trev choked out, his voice strangled. Jenny's voice cut through the tension, sharp as ice. Shut up and watch, she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. Both of you. I risked a glance at my wife. Panic contorted her features, mingled with a profound, gut-wrenching shame. Her lips trembled. Tears welled in her eyes as she tried and failed to look away from the screen. The scene shifted. Now we were inside the hotel room. Grainy footage time-stamped in the corner. But clear enough. Far too clear. There they were, our spouses, Debbie and Trev. She was on her knees in front of him, both of them fully exposed. I turned to look directly at my weeping wife, the bile rising in my throat. The carefully constructed dam of my control cracked. "You know, Deb," I said, my voice dripping with contempt, "if you were going to cheat, you could have at least picked someone hotter." "To heck with you, Carson," Trev finally exploded, half rising from his seat. Jenny didn't even flinch. She delivered a swift, sharp slap to his thigh. "Sit down!" He subsided, glaring at me, impotent rage burning in his eyes. On screen, the sordid scene continued. Then, unbelievably, dialogue. Clear audio picked up by the PI's strategically placed bugs. "Was that good?" Trev's voice, smug, post-coital. Debbie murmured. Do you feel this good with Jen?" "Sometimes," Trev admitted casually. My wife's mood shifted instantly. "I asked you not to mention her when we do this," she snapped. "Why not?" Trev sounded amused. "Bad conscience?" "No," Debbie retorted, rolling away from him. "I just don't want to talk about them." "You're ending the mood, Trev." After that, they settled down. The video ran for nearly an hour, documenting their lazy intimacy, their eventual nap. Debbie woke first, lying with her back to him, staring blankly at the hotel room wall. Then Trev stirred, reached for her. She didn't resist as he pulled her closer, turned her onto her stomach. Jenny, who I'd already shown the highlights reel to, watched her husband now with eyes like chips of granite. Cold, hard, unforgiving. Trev met her gaze, then looked away, angry but defeated. Forced to witness the stark evidence of his betrayal. My wife had stopped watching minutes ago, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with quiet, racking sobs. The video ended. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. Trevor glared at me, his jaw clenched. Jenny stood up abruptly, walked over, and sat down next to me, aligning herself firmly in my camp. "Well," she said, her voice dangerously calm, "that was certainly instructive, wasn't it?" Debbie finally lifted her tear-streaked face, looking pleadingly at me. How did you find out?" It was the only question she could muster. I turned the screen back on, queuing up a different file. Audio only this time, time-stamped from last Saturday. Their voices filled the room, the conversation from my kitchen. Jenny. Is any of that stuff true? What they say about people? Playing away from home on business trips? Debbie. I wouldn't worry too much, Jen. Trev always comes back home to you, doesn't he? Jenny. Yes, but I just wonder what he does. Debbie. Jen, he comes home to you. Don't get twisted up about whatever happens when he's not here. What happens outside the house means nothing. I let the last phrase echo, playing it again and then again louder each time. What happens outside the house means nothing. What happens outside the house means nothing. What happens outside the house means nothing. That's what happened, Deb, I said, my voice deadly quiet. That's what tipped me off. It made me think. If that's your philosophy, well, I gestured towards the blank screen. I already had my suspicions, Jenny interjected smoothly, picking up the narrative baton. The way you two always seem to coincidentally have overlapping trips. The way you'd sometimes get weird and avoid eye contact when certain cities came up in conversation. She paused, turning a look of pure scorn on Trev. It's funny, really. Watching you both tonight, so guilty, constantly checking each other's reactions. You were both pathetic. I hired PIs, I stated flatly. In all 4 of your usual cities, Deb. Phoenix, San Diego, Seattle, Omaha. She winced, shaking her head, fresh tears spilling. She knew more was coming. She was right. I cued the next video. Different city. Phoenix, according to the timestamp. Debbie again, this time at a dimly lit hotel bar, laughing, flirting with a different man. Older, silver-haired, expensive suit. The footage jumped. Now they were walking down a hotel corridor, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. They stopped at a door, fumbled with a key card, disappeared inside. "Oh, you witch!" Trevor suddenly roared, pointing a trembling finger at Debbie. "You cheated on me too?" The sheer absurdity of it hit me. Jen and I looked at each other, and despite everything, we burst out laughing, loudly. His indignant fury, her look of wide-eyed desperation, it was grotesquely comical. They stared at each other, then back at us, bewildered by our reaction. But wait, I drawled, injecting maximum sarcasm into my voice, wiping mock tears from my eyes. There's more. The hits just keep on coming. The final video clip. Las Vegas. Trevor this time. In a different hotel room. With a woman who was decidedly not Jenny. Tall, impossibly sculpted, ebony skin gleaming under the harsh hotel lighting. The footage was graphic, explicit. My husband never does that for me, the woman's voice purred on the recording after a particularly acrobatic sequence. Glad I could assist, Trev panted back, heading towards the bathroom. The camera angle shifted slightly, catching the woman as she nonchalantly reached for a cocktail napkin on the bedside table and proceeded to clean herself up. I couldn't help it. I started clapping slowly, mockingly. Debbie just shook her head, a look of profound disgust on her face. Whether for Trev or the situation, it was hard to tell. My, Jen murmured, her voice laced with venom. Frauds deceiving each other. It's priceless, really. Silence fell again, thick with the stench of betrayal and shattered illusions. Everyone seemed lost in their own toxic thoughts. Debbie was the first to break it. Carson, she whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes desperately seeking mine. So, what now? For us? That's when I turned, pinning her with a gaze as cold and hard as steel. Us? I echoed, the word tasting like poison. There is no us, Debbie. I looked from her to Trev, then back again. You know, I began, my voice dangerously low. Jen and I have had a few days to process, to talk. We're both adaptable people. Maybe not prudes, like Jen said. I saw a flicker of confusion, then horror dawn in Debbie's eyes. Honestly, if either of you, I spat the word, had come to us openly, suggested some kind of arrangement, maybe we could have talked about it. Maybe. I'd even considered asking you, Deb, about exploring things. Together. But you didn't choose that path, did you? My voice rose, fueled by righteous anger. You chose secrets, lies. You went behind my back, behind our backs, decided you had the right to do whatever the heck you wanted on your little trips, and maybe even here at home. Definitely here at home, Jenny cut in sharply. I checked his phone records, Trev. Funny how many late nights at the office coincided with Debbie having a girls' night that somehow never included me. And I heard from someone at your work, Trev, about your dear friend Debbie taking you out for quite a few client lunches that nobody else seemed to know about. Debbie flushed scarlet, looking away. Trevor just stared stonily ahead. So what do you want? Trevor finally mumbled, sounding defeated. Well, Jen said, leaning forward, her voice crisp and businesslike. Looks like Carson and I have pretty much everything we need. Grounds for divorce, airtight. Neither couple has kids, simplifies things. All we need to worry about is division of assets. And since adultery carries weight in Texas courts, she let the implication hang there. You're both pretty much screwed, literally and figuratively. Give me your phones, I commanded, holding out my hand. Both of you, unlocked. Debbie hesitated, tears streaming down her face, but numbly held out her phone. Trevor started to balk, muttering something about privacy. Jen simply stood up, walked over, and snatched the phone from his grasp with surprising speed. Not locked. Idiot, she muttered, handing it to me. Give me a minute, I said, already swiping through Debbie's gallery. Predictably, incriminating photos. Trev, the silver-haired guy from Phoenix. Others I didn't recognize. Nice collection, Deb, I said conversationally, shaking my head. She flinched, looking away again. While I scanned Debbie's phone, Jen quickly accessed Trev's cloud account on his device. She scrolled through messages, photos, location history. Her expression grew grimmer by the second. Okay, I said after a few minutes, tossing both phones onto the coffee table. So, here's the deal. Trust, obliterated. Too many lies, too much sneaking around. While I was talking, I continued, my voice hardening, Jen was making a few calls. You both work for companies with codes of conduct, right? Morals clauses? Panic flared in their eyes. Funny thing about corporate America, they take this stuff seriously now, especially after a few high-profile scandals. Your bosses, your HR departments, their legal teams, they wouldn't be thrilled to see these videos, would they, Trev? Isn't your division head famously intolerant after his own little indiscretion cost the company millions a few years back? God, Trev breathed, his face paling. Yeah, exactly, Jen snarled, turning on him fully now. I gave you everything, Trev. Everything you ever asked for in bed outside of it. I trusted you implicitly, and you stabbed me in the back, with her. She gestured contemptuously towards Debbie. It's over. Done. She paused, then added, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Well, not quite yet. What do you mean? Trev asked warily. Divorces are happening, I stated, taking control again. Non-negotiable. And you will both sign agreements giving us each 70% of the marital assets, fair compensation for pain, suffering, and public humiliation potential. If you fight us, if you make this messy, these videos, I tapped the hard drive sitting next to the TV, go wide. Family, friends, your employers, everyone. Carson, Debbie gasped, her voice thick with pleading. Please, don't. Maybe we can work this out, counseling? Seriously, Deb? I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Seriously? If the roles were reversed, if you just watched an hour-long video of me screwing Jen behind your back, would you be suggesting counseling? Would you be willing to work it out? My voice dripped with sarcasm. Give me one chance, Carson, please. I did give you chances, Deb, I snapped, finally losing the carefully controlled facade. We were having problems, real problems, before you left on your little closeness tour. We were supposed to be working on them. And what did you do? You decided to secretly start taking birth control pills again without a single word to me. We're married, or we were. We were supposed to make decisions together. You betrayed my trust before you even spread your legs for him or him or him. I gestured vaguely towards the gallery images still fresh in my mind. You lost respect for me, for us, long before the cheating started. That just made it easy for you, didn't it? I paused, catching my breath, then asked, my voice low again, I just want to know one thing. Why? She looked away, twisting her hands in her lap. Then, hesitantly, she met my gaze. Before you, Carson, I didn't really have much experience. One guy, it was over in less than a minute. That was it. Her voice was barely a whisper. That was the full extent of my intimacy before we got married. I wanted to know what else was out there, what it felt like to be with other men. I stared at her, incredulous. You should have thought of that before you walked down the aisle, Debbie, I shot back. That's when people experiment, not after you take vows. Marriage isn't just lovey-dovey bees. It's a contract, an exclusive one. Just the two of you against the world. Until and unless both partners agree otherwise. You know, forsaking all others. She started, then stopped. I wanted to explore before the wedding, but then I met you. And everything moved so fast, and I didn't want to risk losing you. The first few years, they were amazing, Carson. Truly. But this past year, I don't know. Those old feelings came back. Wondering. Not about love, she added hastily, seeing the look on my face. I had you for that. Just closeness. Curiosity. That's all it was. I shook my head, a wave of weary disgust washing over me. All you had to do was ask, Deb, I said quietly, the anger momentarily replaced by a profound sadness. All you had to do was talk to me, here, at home. Maybe we could have found people, couples we knew, trusted. Heck, I might have even agreed to let you sleep with him. I jerked my chin towards Trev. If we'd all decided on it together, as friends, laid out rules. But you didn't. You two went behind our backs. You violated everything. With trust and love comes respect, Debbie. And you lost all respect for me when you decided you could just sneak around. I looked at Trev. We could have figured something out. But you chose to do it without us. Jen nodded grimly beside me. That goes for you too, Trev, she said, her voice flat. Especially after we talked about this, didn't we? About wanting more variety. And what did you tell me? It was my turn to look at Jen in surprise. Debbie and Trev exchanged shocked glances. You talked about this, Debbie stammered, looking at Trev. What did he say? I prompted Jen. This bastard, Jen spat, glaring at Trev, told me he would never share me with Carson. Said he'd leave me if I ever brought it up again, or if he even suspected I was thinking about it. Can you believe the hypocrisy? Debbie turned on Trev, her face contorted with fury. You said that to her? She scrambled off the sofa and lunged at him, fists flailing. You stupid bastard! She shrieked, landing a surprisingly solid punch to his shoulder before he could react. He tried to fend her off as she rained blows on him. When we started this, I said we should bring them in, remember? But you said no. They'd never handle it. They'd leave us. I listened to you, you arrogant prick, and now look where we are. Oh, get off me, you psycho. Trev shoved her back hard, scrambling to his feet. You turned into a hoe the second you got a taste of it, Deb. It didn't take much. After me, you were already sniffing around for others. Don't act like some innocent victim here. I remember that Christmas party last year. Kissing me in the kitchen for 2 solid minutes the second Jen went to the bathroom and Carson stepped outside. Didn't take me long to get you into bed after that, did it? Less than a week. A chill shot through me. That Christmas party. It had seemed so perfect. Our best friends, celebrating together. While Jenny and I were momentarily out of sight, they were kissing, consummating the betrayal right under our noses. I hate you, Debbie screamed at him, her face flushed, tears forgotten in her rage. Feelings mutual, sweetheart, Trev shot back, his own face dark with anger. Jen and I just watched them, 2 rats tearing at each other in a trap of their own making. Disgust warred with a grim sense of vindication. Was there any hope? Any shred of decency left between them? It looked utterly hopeless. Too many lies, too much poison had seeped into the foundations. Maybe, if we were older, if kids were involved, I might have considered something. Weakness. Forgiveness. But we were young enough to start over. No kids binding us together. I wanted out. Clean break, scorched earth. Suddenly, Trev turned his fury towards Jenny. He took a step towards her, his hand raised, coiled to strike. You set me up, you witch, he snarled. Before his hand could connect, I moved. Instinct, rage, adrenaline, a potent cocktail. I intercepted his arm, twisting it violently. He yelled in pain and surprise. I didn't stop there. I swung, putting my whole body into it, my fist connected squarely with his jaw. A sickening crack echoed in the suddenly silent room. Trev staggered back, eyes wide with shock, a dark smear forming at the corner of his mouth. He lunged at me then, fueled by pain and fury. We crashed into the small table near the doorway to the kitchen, sending a lamp flying. Glass shattered. He swung wildly. I blocked, ducked, landed another hard right to his ribs. He grunted, doubling over. We stumbled into the kitchen, knocking over a chair. Utensils clattered from a holder onto the floor. It was messy, ugly, primal. He was bigger than me, but rage gave me an edge. I wrestled him down, his flailing arms knocking a bowl of fruit off the counter. Oranges and apples scattered across the tile floor like broken promises. I got him pinned, face down, his cheek pressed against the cool tile amidst the debris. He struggled, cursing, but I had leverage. Calm down, I yelled, my knee pressed hard into his back, my own breath coming in ragged gasps. Just calm the heck down! He continued to thrash. An idea sparked, cold and calculated in the recesses of my mind, the villainous part of me taking charge. I glanced towards the utility drawer near the sink. Zip ties, heavy-duty ones I used for bundling cables in the garage. Jen, I called out, my voice tight, strained. Utility drawer, black zip ties, now! She didn't hesitate. She retrieved them, her face pale but resolute, and handed them to me. Debbie watched from the living room doorway, frozen, horrified. With considerable effort, I wrenched Trev's hands behind his back, ignoring his curses and threats. I cinched 2 thick zip ties tightly around his wrists. Then, for good measure, I used another pair to bind his ankles. He lay there, panting, immobilized, trussed up like an animal on my kitchen floor. A mess of spilled wine, shattered glass, and scattered fruit surrounded him. I stood up, breathing heavily, looking down at him. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing him subdued, helpless. What the heck, Carson? He spat, twisting his head to glare up at me. You're crazy! I'm crazy? I laughed, the sound sharp, humorless. Look who's talking. You were about to hit your wife, you piece of crap. You needed restraining. I nudged him slightly with my foot. Feeling calmer now, Trev? He just glared, silent, radiating hatred. You brought this on yourself, I continued, my voice regaining its cold composure. Both of you. I looked towards Debbie, who was now openly weeping again, leaning against the doorframe for support. You think this is fun, blowing up our lives? You didn't have to, Trev started. Didn't have to what? I cut him off. Defend Jen? Expose your pathetic little affair? Hold you accountable? I crouched down beside him, my face close to his. You made your bed, Trev. Both of you. Now? You get to lie in it. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Or, in your case, lie on my kitchen floor. I stood up again, retrieved a pair of heavy-duty kitchen shears from the knife block. The metallic snick as I tested them cut through the tense air. Trev flinched. Get out of my house, I said, my voice flat, deadly serious. I knelt and quickly snipped the zip ties around his ankles, then his wrists. He rubbed his chafed skin, slowly, painfully pushing himself up. "Get your crap together and get out. Now." He hesitated, looking towards Jen, perhaps for some sign, some word. She just stared back at him, her expression unreadable, cold. "Go," I repeated, my voice low and menacing. "Before I change my mind and call the police. Assault, trespassing, I wonder what else we could add." He scrambled to his feet, avoiding my eyes, avoiding Jen's. He cast one last hateful glance at Debbie, then stumbled out the front door without a backward glance, leaving the wreckage behind him. The door clicked shut. Silence descended again, broken only by Debbie's ragged sobs. She didn't move from the doorway. Then she did something I hadn't expected, not really. She slowly sank to her knees on the living room carpet, then crawled towards Jen and me, her head bowed, tears dripping onto the rug. "Please," she choked out, her voice muffled by tears and shame. "Carson, Jen, I beg you. Please forgive me. Give me another chance. I know I screwed up. Royally, it's all my fault. Do whatever you want with me. Punish me. Just don't throw me out like this. Please, Carson." "Jen, talk to him, please. I'll do anything." She looked up then, her eyes red-rimmed, desperate, pleading directly into mine. It was a test. I knew it. A sliver of the man who had loved her, who maybe still loved some ghost of her, felt a pang of pity. But it was drowned out by the cold tide of betrayal and calculated retribution. What she did, unforgivable, irrevocable, letting her stay even in purgatory. It felt wrong, weak. But kicking her out onto the street immediately felt needlessly cruel, even for the villain I was becoming. A different kind of punishment formed in my mind. "Jen's moving in here," I stated, my voice devoid of inflection, watching her face crumble. Into my bedroom." I saw her wince as if struck. "You'll take the guest room, for now." I understand," she whispered, choking back a fresh wave of sobs. "I deserve it." "We need to talk," I added curtly, "about the terms of your continued temporary residence." Jen looked at me, a question in her eyes. "What are you doing, Carson?" she murmured, low enough for only me to hear. "You know you can't trust her, right?" "I know," I murmured back. "This isn't about trust. It's about control." Debbie remained kneeling, looking between us, despair etched onto her features. "Please," was all she could manage. "Shut up," Jen snapped, echoing her earlier command to Trev. She nudged Debbie none too gently with her foot. "Get up." Debbie flinched, then slowly, unsteadily got to her feet. "Get your things, Debbie," I said, my voice hard, final. The brief moment of considering letting her stay evaporated. "No, clean break, now. Pack a bag, enough for a week. We'll figure out how you get the rest later." She stared at me, hope dying in her eyes, replaced by desolate understanding. She nodded numbly, tears streaming silently now. She turned, shoulders slumped in defeat, and walked slowly towards the bedroom, my bedroom, to pack. 40 minutes later, she emerged, dragging 2 suitcases. A travel tote was slung over one shoulder, her laptop bag in the other hand, purse clutched tightly. Jen and I stood side by side in the hallway, silent observers, as she wrestled her luggage out the front door and loaded it into her car. She paused by the driver's side door, turned back, made a hesitant move towards me, maybe reaching for a hug, a final touch. I stepped back deliberately, putting space between us. Her hand dropped. A fresh sob escaped her lips. Then she got into the car, started the engine, and drove away, disappearing into the night, leaving behind the ruins of our marriage. As her taillights vanished, I turned to Jen. "Well," I said, my voice tight, "phase 1 complete." "They brought it on themselves," Jen replied, her voice grim. She leaned against the door frame, looking out into the darkness where Debbie's car had been. "Every spouse gets the opportunity to cheat, Carson. Not everyone takes it." She turned back to me, a strange look in her eyes. "Funny, isn't it?" "What's funny?" I asked, starting to clean up the mess in the kitchen. "Some people think they're in an open marriage," she said, wandering into the living room, picking up a fallen photo frame. Us, Debbie, Trev, Jen, smiling on a beach somewhere a lifetime ago. They just forget to tell their spouse about it. She tossed the frame onto the sofa. She looked at me directly then. "So, do you want an open relationship, Carson?" I paused, considering her question, considering the wreckage around us. "Too much drama," I replied honestly. "Too much like what they did. I met her gaze. Do you? I just need different, she admitted, her voice low. Sometimes. It's been a long time since I had any variety. Then maybe, sometimes, I conceded. We might need someone else. An agreement then, she said, a faint, dangerous smile playing on her lips as she closed the distance between us. Her eyes held a spark I hadn't seen before. Or maybe I just hadn't been looking. 3 months later, the divorces were finalized. Swift, brutal, efficient. Jen and I both got the 70% split we'd demanded. The threat of the videos hung heavy over the negotiations. Debbie and Trev signed everything put in front of them, eager to make it stop. Jen sold her house quickly. I took out a home equity loan to pay Debbie her diminished share of the house's value. One day in court, a few signatures, and it was over. Legally, anyway. The emotional debris lingered. Debbie lost almost everything. The house, the husband, the friends, a significant chunk of her financial security. She kept her job miraculously. Her parents eventually found out. She confessed preemptively, terrified I'd send them the highlight reel out of spite. I never did. The threat had been enough. Trevor? He vanished. After the divorce from Jen was final, he packed his bags and disappeared. His last communication to Jen was a vague text saying he'd be in touch. That was 2 years ago. We haven't heard a word. Good riddance. Debbie still works, still travels. Phoenix, San Diego, Seattle, Omaha. What she does, who she sees, it means less than nothing to me now. Jen and I saw her once, about a year after the split, crossing the street downtown, engrossed in her phone, looking diminished, smaller. We didn't acknowledge her. Jen and I live together now, in the house Debbie and I once shared. It's complicated. We're lovers, partners of a sort, allies forged in the fires of betrayal. But commitment? Marriage? Neither of us is rushing towards that particular cliff again anytime soon. The scars are still too fresh. We talk about traveling, maybe a round-the-world trip, running away perhaps, or maybe just running towards something new. Then, the other day, a phone call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Carson? The voice was hesitant, fragile, instantly recognizable. Debbie. What do you want, Debbie? My voice was flat, cold, hardened by time and indifference. I hope you're doing well, she stammered. Silence stretched. Carson, I need help. Help with what? I asked warily. I'm sick, she whispered, her voice breaking. I went to the doctor, routine checkup. They found something. An STD from back then, probably. The treatments, they're expensive. My insurance isn't great. I don't have the money, Carson. I was wondering, hoping, maybe you could. Disgust coiled in my gut, cold and sharp. Her carelessness, her betrayal, still sending out ripples, still demanding a price. My price? No, not anymore. That sounds like a you problem, Debbie, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth, any pity, just ice. Maybe hit up Trev, or Mr. Phoenix, or any of the others in your collection. Carson, please, she sobbed. No. The word was final. Absolute. Don't call me again. I hung up the phone before she could reply, the click loud in the sudden silence of the room. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then tossed it onto the counter. What happens outside the house means nothing. No, Debbie, it means everything. Absolutely everything. And sometimes the consequences keep coming long after the act is over.